it's a two-way journey as well. So I learn a lot from my kids as well, because they are
Mm.
born and raised here. They understand the local culture really well, probably better than us, because that's now embedded in them. They got that thing in them. And when they are talking to me, and when they reflect some of those uh, kind of behaviors, that's really good to learn from. So, and they teach you every day.
This is Chocolate and Coffee Break, a compassionate proposition, a space to share stories, bridge divides, and spark meaningful connections. So grab your chocolate, pour your cuppa, and let's break down barriers, one conversation at a time. And now, here's your host, Andrea Putting.
And welcome to Chocolate and Coffee Break today for another episode where we explore stories and learn more about compassion. So I hope you've got your cuppa and your chocolate ready to go. Now, joining me today is Rashid Khan, and his story really embodies what chocolate and coffee is about. So, Rashid works in emergency management and founded a platform called Evacuation to help keep people safe when life takes an unexpected turn. And he's lived through some powerful experiences that have shaped the way he sees connection, community, and compassion. So it's wonderful to have Rashid here, but as in things happen, and especially I'm sure Rashid will tell you in emergency management, his internet's not playing nice today, and we don't have his video. But welcome anyway, Rashid.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for having me.
It's lovely to connect with you again and to share in a little bit of chocolate and coffee magic. So I like to start with my heart opening cards. And so I have a question for you from my cards, Rashid. When did you feel like an outsider and who helped you feel like you belonged?
That's a great question, Andrea. Um, Being within an emergency management, um, I went into one of the rooms at one of the conferences a couple of years ago, and I found myself got an odd audience to that platform, and I thought, am I the only emergency management guy in the room, which is different from the others? And that made me think a lot about how the indifferences in you can be very meaningful and can be very upfront in that case. But interesting enough, there was a lot of people who actually came and spoke to me, and then we broke the barriers of all that first facade, and then broke through that community of, yeah, all the communications, and then broke that barrier. I think that first hello uh, was a really good sign of how you can belong and how you can become part of a really good community who starts to listen to you and then acknowledges you and values you.
Yeah. And that's the experience I'm sure a lot of us have is when we walk into a place first, when we first go somewhere, we feel very uncomfortable. But it just takes a bit of reaching out and offer a bit of chocolate. So, Rashid, I'd love to share the story of why you came to decided to move to Australia because we have talked about this before in a previous incarnation of chocolate and coffee. So, I'd love to share that story again.
Um, I actually decided to come to stay in 2002, when few friends of us were just sitting down there on a table talking about few different options of what we're going to do next after the university. And then I said, why not go and explore other countries and see what else we have to offer to other continents or the other countries. Some of us decided to choose the pathway of doing some education overseas, and I decided to to come to Australia. And being a cricket fan, speaking from the heart, since the 1992 World Cup victory in Australia, Australia has always been a very close place to my heart. And being a cricket fan, it has always been. Cricket was not the only reason to decide to come to Australia, but obviously there's a lot of opportunities which we saw. Another friend of mine, he moved at that time prior to us, and he had some really good stories to tell. The social um, cohesion he found in this country, um, along with everybody else, was one of the reason, a very strong reason to come to Australia. Being in
So,
an emergency management, not at that time.
yes, that came later, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so it was the cricket that sparked for the Australia, but you said you found a lot of social cohesion in Australia. What was it like walking into a new country?
I only had one friend when I came to Australia, and then I think within a couple of months, I had maybe a dozen very good acquaintances, uh, nurturing into friendships by just having those small conversations or small talks, maybe over the tram or maybe on the road or near a small shopping town. It just ended up being really good connections, and that's what I found, that people are really welcoming, and they started to understand the talent which is coming to Australia, and I really admired that thing in the society.
Yes. So how do you find the mixing of your culture that you came with and the culture that's already in Australia?
There's two ways to that. One is, I'm always willing to adapt to other things as well. So it's maybe a personal thing, a personal characteristic of my personality, that I'm always willing to mix up, and I was willing to learn from others as well. I think the barriers I found, and that could be within the community as well, and the fraction of the community, is the ability to adapt to another country, or to adapt to a new area or new community. And that's very important. If people are still kind of, I won't say stuck, but they are still living in the country they belong, or they came from, and they're not willing to adapt to some of the cultural things and sensitivities of this society, I think that becomes a barrier. I think first, once you move to a new place, you need to break that barrier in your mind, that you are willing to change, or you're willing to adapt to and learn some really good things about this community. And that's what I found, that this there's one thing which is called culture, and the other thing which I call it a subculture. So you just need to find not just the culture, but a subculture which really understands you as a person, or as what you are bringing to the table, and vice versa. If you're willing to learn that way, I think that brings a really good learning and fitting in.
Yeah, so it takes that willingness to to see what else there is out in the world. But I'm assuming that you're also bringing with you your own culture and able to share that with other people. And I'm sure at home you keep a lot of your own culture alive, because I'm sure with you having two small children, that having giving them the experience of your culture that you came from would still be very important.
That is important, and it's a two-way journey as well. So I learn a lot from my kids as well, because they are
Mm.
born and raised here. They understand the local culture really well, probably better than us, because that's now embedded in them. They got that thing in them, and when they are talking to me, and when they reflect some of those uh, kind of behaviors that's really good to learn from. So and they teach you every day. So it's just not one way journey of us teaching them our cultural things and then not understanding what they are bringing back from school or from their childcare, from their play group or schools or learning places.
Yes.
um, I think that's I think it's a two-way journey, and when it's a two-way journey, that makes a lot of cohesion.
It does. So let's just sneak off to a break so I can have a bit of chocolate. And while we are, take a notice of the wonderful people who support this show and subscribe, like, and comment.
When I hit perimenopause, all I heard was doom and decline until I took a sacred pause and I went searching for women who are radiant after menopause, like Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and the late Dr. Gladys McGarry, still shining at 103. In this book, I share their stories and wisdom and the magic that menopause truly holds. 7 Wonders of Menopause is a sacred reminder. You're not ending, you're returning. Available at independent bookshops in Australia and Amazon around the world.
Did you know that only 30% of speakers are women and that only 13% of panels feature women? In order to change that, there is now a directory at womenspeakers.com.au where you can go and search for a speaker. We also have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn under the name Australian Women Speakers, where you can just go and post about your event and women will respond.
Now, Rashid, I'd love to talk now about how you got into emergency management because it does have a kind of a similar flavor to how I started with chocolate and coffee breaks. So let's talk a little bit about that turning point that directed your life.
I will probably start with a short story which happened to me when I was a kid, when I was a 9 years old kid. There was an incident which really moved me and kind of embedded that first level of how emergency can occur and how it affects people. I was only 9 years old when an ammunition depot exploded in my city. There was uh, a primary school in front of my house, and as soon as I heard those first signs of kind of bombing, um, I ran straight to that school and I took 18 kids to safety. My parents were all also looking for me at that same time because it was a chaotic moment in the city. And when they found me, they found that what I have done, and they really acknowledged that, and the whole area really found it valuable of me responding in that manner. I think that was my first counter to emergency, and that kind of sit behind somewhere in my brain. And even if I came to Australia, I worked in databases and I worked for one of the largest bank in Australia. And interesting enough, there was a second opportunity came to me in 2011 when someone was going for a maternity leave, and then they handed over the emergency management to me. Um, and as soon as I started that role, it bring back all the memories of my childhood as what can be done better in whilst an emergency is happening. So I started working in emergency management, started understanding a lot of laws, regulation, Australian standards, international standards of how emergencies are managed. And I started to find that there are still few gaps which can be done, which can be covered through um, some of at that time there was apps weren't that common, but I started working on an app idea. So 2014 onwards, I started working on that idea. As you know, in a journey like this, when it's a long journey, um, and in a big project, or you started to lose a bit of that energy or momentum at some point of time, whether it's financial, whether it's time wise, whether it's family pressure, and
Mm.
or so many other things which can happen. So you can manage those emergencies within emergencies. And I started to kind of lose track at a little bit of that at 2016. But then Burke Street incident happened. I was right in the midst of that emergency management response.
So can we just explain a little bit about what that was for our
Yep.
international?
So it was 20th of January 2017, Friday, and we came back from lunch as a team. And then as soon as we entered our building at Burke Street, we started hearing really loud noises coming from outside, like screaming, and straight away we walked off outside to go and see what is actually happening. As anybody else, a prudent person will probably do, or a curious person will do. And we walked outside, and then we saw the gunshots coming from the police car right on that corner. Um, and then they just shot the car to make sure that it becomes stoppable and then safe for everybody else. But in the midst, there was a lot of people that were injured at that time. I saw firsthand of those that emergency unfolding.
Yes. So
Um,
somebody had driven a car through the main shopping mall and run people over.
that's right. So there was someone who was not in the right mindset,
Mm.
drove a car on Burke Street, which is one of the busiest street in Melbourne, and he drove off on the pathways, on the sidewalks, and on the main street as well, injuring 20 plus people and killing six. So that was a horrific incident in Melbourne, and no one was expecting that to happen.
No.
I been in that in emergency response. I found that if the communication can help safeguard people who are inside the building and ask them not to come outside, we might have saved few lives in there. And the police response or the emergency response could have been better. The same way which how we responded, um, as going outside as a curious person, that can also lead to um, being become another victim of that particular incident.
Mm.
So if the communication is right, I could be one of those victims. So if the communication is right, and given in the right manner, I think that what can change the response and the response time. And the only people who will be responding to that incident should have a clear pathway or the clear direction on how to respond to that emergency. I
So
think
this
that was a really big takeaway
so this
from that.
changed your whole trajectory in emergency management, didn't it?
Absolutely. And from that point onwards, I never look back and say, I need to stop. I kind of been given that direction towards my purpose. So I found my purpose, as this is what I am meant to do. This is what I'm born to do. So I found my purpose that if I could save just one life through the technology I'm bringing, through the technology I'm working on, my purpose of life will be filled.
Yes. So it's really interesting how an experience like that can trigger our compassionate purpose in life. So it gives compassion somewhere to go.
That's right. So you just need to channel your energy in that positivity
Mm.
and find that positive pathway through compassion and through understanding. What can you do? What can you do better to make sure that an incident like that doesn't occur? And even if it does, it doesn't have that much of impact on people's lives and on society.
Yes. So it gives us, when we open up to what's presented before us and look for the opportunities, something amazing can come from that. So it was similar with chocolate and coffee day, how I started that. That was a response to a situation that I had seen from afar. I was sitting here in my office and I was watching it on the internet in Sydney. But it really sparked that there is something better we can do. There is some better way for us to live and to make an impact on the communities that we live in. So we have that starting point of compassion is really sparking us to be more purposeful with our lives. So let's jump on another quick break so I can have a bit more chocolate and a bit of my cuppa. And don't forget to subscribe. And we will see who else is supporting us. Thank you.
Introducing 123 Read to Me. We give books to children who don't have books so they can succeed. Help us give away books to supported playgroups, kindergartens, schools, community events. Come and sort books. Donate money. $5 equals one book in the hand of a child. Because just one book a day creates clever, kind and confident kids. 123 Read to Me. If this interests you, let's talk.
You've ticked the boxes: career, commitments, calendar that's more packed than your pantry, but something's still missing. In Compassionate Purpose, Andrea Putting invites you to stop chasing busy and start living with intention. This book is about real fulfillment through small acts of compassion, purpose-driven service, and meaning that last. No pressure, no perfection, just purpose with heart. Compassionate Purpose, Discovering a Life of Fulfillment. Search for Andrea Putting on Amazon.
So, Rashid, before we go any further, let's just explore what you have done with evacuation so people understand where that took you.
There's two parts of that journey. One is how we started to use technology in the first place, how we started developing those apps, which are the communication tool for everybody who's in the building and to the responders of an emergency. Currently, there are very loose communication protocols, and some of them are 120 years old. And then because they are part of the compliance system, and they always exist. And I'm not going to challenge those because they have worked really well for 120 years. But how quickly the technology is changing is also demanding us to see more options of how to navigate through emergencies and utilize those technologies for the betterment for those communications in emergency. So we develop evacuation as a communication software where it communicates with everybody, not just people in emergency, but also gives a snapshot to the people who are responding to emergencies. So we develop evacuation, not just evacuation, we actually develop few other components of evacuation. For residential, we would very recently launched evac tracker, which is communication for the people who are living in a building and making sure that they are being accounted for in an emergency. And that communication is also shared with the responders. So when they are coming to the site, they are not kind of blindfolded with how the building looks like. They already know how the building looks like, how many people are in there, how many people left, what is their current focus point should be, and then they can focus on the real deal, dealing with emergency and prioritizing their work according to the needs of the people. So this is what we are trying to achieve through evacuation.
Yeah. And that's very powerful and really vital. So, Rashid, I want to dive into you did a TEDx talk and you talked about emergencies, but also diversity and how that affects the two. Because disasters don't discriminate. So how can we just tell us a little bit about what you explored with that?
Um, it's a learning for both sides of the equation. It's not just learning um, from emergency management point of view. As you already said, that the emergencies don't discriminate. When they occur, they will have the same effect on people, their lives, and the society. Yes, mitigation and preparedness are really key elements of how you deal with them, but the effect um, will be kind of taken equally by everybody who is affected by that emergency. So my TEDx talk was about how we can use diversity and inclusion to make sure that we are facing those challenges together. So it's not just learning from the past, but learning from the future. So it has got two pathways. That's what I said. It has got two parts of that equation. One is we need to learn from the people of the land. They've been living here for 5 million years. And this land, they understand this land better than anybody else.
Mm.
They have survived the test of time, the test of disasters. They would have seen and passed on that knowledge of disaster from generation to generation. We just need to grab that knowledge and understand how we can utilize that knowledge, which is somewhere there. We need to grab that knowledge and understand that and use it for the betterment of understanding emergencies. One of that example is you might have seen in last 5 years that we have started to mitigate the bushfire effect by burning some of the land which
Mm.
is out there. That learning was developed by understanding the original people of the land because they used to use that as a ritual before every bushfire season.
Yes.
That is the number one mitigation strategy now being adapted across the globe, um, because that was exist that existed thousands of years. We were just unable to grab that knowledge from them, and by just grabbing that knowledge, I think in the last 5 years time we have deterred billions of dollars of losses and another capital, which is the human life save and the life saved uh, for the fauna living in that area. That's just one example of learning from. If we don't include them, if we don't diversify our understanding on from the people of land, we will not be able to answer those questions. The other part is the people who are coming to this country. And we got a vast majority coming from different parts of the world, and Australia being a multicultural society, I think there's a great opportunity for us to learn from the people who have been exposed to a disaster like tsunami, people from Sri Lanka. So I was having that discussion with somebody in one of the kind of a coffee break, um, and that sparked that TEDx talk because he was talking about the deep lessons they learned through tsunami and how they managed to get away from those waves of disaster. And what did they do next? Like, what are the recovery steps?
Mm.
What did they do to recoup their strength and to build the society again? I think there was great learnings from that. That's another part which comes from diversity. If we diversify our discussions, similar to how you have these coffee discussions with others to break down those barriers, to understand and value their conversations, that's where you get the real value, not just through other social means, but for emergency management, definitely.
Yeah. And that's a powerful thing that when we do talk to other people, we get to understand what they've gone through, how they've experienced it, how they've come through it. And that can really help us to find our own center when we have an emergency situation. So, Rashid, how can people get in touch with you or find out more about evacuation?
uh, you can find www.evacuation.com. That's our main site for evacuation. We've got www.evactracker.com.au. And people can Google me as Rashid Khan Emergency, and you will find me on the first 12 pages.
So thanks, Rashid. This week, share a cuppa with someone whose background or story is different from yours and ask them what keeps you stay strong when life takes you. And share it with us. And as always, until next, let love be the loudest voice.